Yay! We are back for the 30 days of Dragon Paths here in September, back with our Draconic Wicca 101 complete beginner's guide here. And just a disclaimer for all my friends out there, this is just how I understand Draconic Wicca, the system that I founded with my Dragon Guardians and cultivated with the Hatchlings and the Hatchling Clan over my lifetime and our lifetime together. So this might be a little bit different from everybody else's like Draconic Wicca definition or their particular practice of Draconic Wicca, which is totally valid, but we are just here to share our system with you in case it resonates. So that is the disclaimer, and with that out of the way, let us just jump into the parts of the guide. We have the part 1, which is the guide. We have notes, which is part 2. We have the basics, which is part 3. We have how to practice Draconic Wicca for all faiths as part 4. And lastly, we have the tips and tricks of Draconic Wicca for part 5. So all of that will be in the video stamps. You can skip to whatever part you like. And this comes with a bunch of free resources as well on Patreon, Discord, website, all of it, the Amino, the Facebook, the Tumblr, you name it. And the compiled list and breakdown will be available in the Hatchling Clan Discord server if you want a detailed breakdown, and all the links are already in the description for you if you are interested. But I am going to stop rambling about the epic awesomeness of the series, and let's jump into part 1, which is the Draconic Wicca Guide. So this is a nature-based religion that is a focus on dragons, right? So they are the personification of the divine and of the forces of nature, right? So that is typically what sets Draconic Wicca apart from other paths of the dragon, right? And most commonly believes in god and goddess as dragons, with the most popular choice being Tiamat as the goddess and Epsu as the god, though the beliefs will vary from Draconic Wiccan to Draconic Wiccan. And that's just generally speaking when you find a Draconic Wiccan, or usually when you first start out Draconic Wicca, this is usually just kind of the general consensus of where we start, if you will. So next, their path is usually guided by one dragon guardian named Monte traditionally, but each dragon is different, or there are many primary dragons. Now, not every single person is going to use the term Monte as a term of respect for their primary dragon guardian or the dragon guardian they work with the most, but some do, and it's actually not uncommon for them to do so, as popularized by my other videos many years ago, which you can find on my Draconic Wicca playlist linked in the cards. But next we have the elements within witchcraft are already personified. The elements within witchcraft are usually personified as dragons through guardians, rulers, or even deities. So all that means is that in Draconic Wicca, instead of just saying I work with the element of earth, air, fire, and water, or in spirit, right, they're going to work with an elemental dragon guardian of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, or a dragon ruler of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Or they're going to find dragon deities that resonate with each of these elements for them in their personal practice and understanding, and then incorporate them that way into their Draconic Wicca, right? So it really just actually depends who you talk to, but for the most part, they will see anything of the elements in the natural world, a dragon spirit will be personified, or it will be personified as a dragon spirit. I hope that makes sense. And then next there is a focus on shape-shifting with the help of dragons based off the etymology of the word Wicca and Witcha. So this is basically the root word of Wicca. So we know it as Wicca today. That's how we pronounce it in modern day. But it comes from the Old English word Witcha, which is spelled the same way, but is the root word for the modern day word witch. And if you didn't know this, I really highly recommend that if you are called to Draconic Wicca, definitely research the etymology of the words Wicca or Witcha, W-I-C-C-A, and Witcha, W-I-C-C-E, which is just the masculine version, which is Wicca, and Witcha, or ending with an A, is the masculine version, and the feminine version ends with an E, and it just means someone who is a shapeshifter or bends reality with their will, or one who transforms kind of thing. It's it's really all about shape-shifting energy, these words. And you know, doing things to bring about change in reality with your own willpower is a huge focus on it, which is how we get the modern day word witch. So it's really important to study the etymology of not only the words witcha and witcha if you're going to be a Draconic Wiccan, but also study the etymology of the word draconic too, because it might surprise you. Not only does it mean a giant like serpent or giant monster reptile or even just a dragon, it can mean one with a piercing gaze or one who sees clearly. So Draconic Wicca, if you really break down what it literally means, could be one who shapeshifts and see clearly with the help of dragons. Okay, so that's my favorite thing in the world and why I love Draconic Wicca. But we are moving on to the beliefs, okay, my darling? And these are just like a basic overview, generally speaking, what the beliefs are for Draconic Wiccans. Typically believes in a god and goddess as dragons, has dragon guardians, elemental rulers that are often servitors or egregores, and all that means is that these individuals are going to create like elemental personifications of dragons for their own practice, right? Like you'll see the dragon rulers on like YouTube sometimes. Like these are like not historical like dragons, right? Like they are created by the practitioners and they are engaged with sometimes with more than one practitioner, sometimes with just one, and it is very much like a unique personification of a particular element as a dragon is for the most part how dragon rulers work. And then next we have celebrates the Wheel of the Year, but with Sabbat and Espit dragons. So if you don't know what Sabbats and Espits are, basically we call it the Wheel of the Year because it's about like the changing of the seasons. So, and like a Sabbat is like Beltane or Samhain or Yule, Ostara, Imbolc, Litha, Ludnasta, Lammas, Mabon. I think I listed all of them. And that are like solar holidays and seasonal holidays, right? So like the winter and summer solstices, and then like the spring and autumn equinoxes, as well as like the major holidays like Samhain and Beltane, right? So that's just generally speaking what the Wheel of the Year is. And instead of celebrating those like generally how they are, you will also see Draconic Wiccans celebrating these Sabbats in the context of working with the Sabbat dragon attached to them. So like that would look like the Samhain dragon guardian or the Yule dragon guardian, and each Draconic Wiccan is really going to understand that in their own way, because it really kind of is like a universal personal, like a unverified personal gnosis that is kind of a universal practice of Draconic Wiccans who choose to engage with dragons in every way that you can within reality and witchcraft and stuff like that. So Espit dragons are the same way. It's like dragon personifications of the like lunar holidays, so like a full moon dragon or a dark moon dragon or like a waxing and waning dragon or like an eclipse dragon, new moon dragon, things like that, okay? Just to name a few. And then also has faith in their ability to shapeshift with dragons, and that is really the most general consensus of the beliefs of Draconic Wiccans I can give you as I understand it. But next we have the practice. So typically their Draconic Wiccan practice is unique every day. However, they regularly celebrate the turning of the seasons or even the mainstream holidays like Christmas with dragons. So I know this might seem kind of strange, but I did come across like some Draconic Wiccans who celebrated mainstream holidays with like dragons. Yeah, like the Christmas dragon, Valentine's Day dragon, St. Patrick's Day dragon, 4th of July dragon, like what, New Year's dragon. Yeah, I know. That one was a lot for me when I really thought about it. But some people do that. I think it's actually really cute. It's the 4th of July dragon, when they talked about it, made me cringe a little. I was like, what about a firework dragon? That seems better. But anyway, that's just kind of like how, like to demonstrate how unique each Draconic Wiccan is going to be, right? And like mainstream holidays, like even the most like obscure ones that you'll find in like other countries too, it really just depends. And the turning of the seasons is really kind of the most important, and celebrating the cyclical cycles of like the natural world, not only here on Earth, but within like the like lunar phases and like within like the solar system. Sometimes it goes like as far out as some people choose to, and they work with like those cycles personified through dragons, which is pretty Draconic Wiccan of them to do, if I do say so myself. But anyway, Next, we have the purpose of the Draconic Wicca practice, which is typically to shapeshift and celebrate with dragons, and even to worship dragons too. It really just depends who you ask again. But I will say that there's a huge emphasis on celebrating like just the natural cycles of the world, like with dragons, like as a Draconic Wiccan. That is kind of really what sets it apart. As like different than other dragon paths, as well as like the religious element of worship that tends to be within Draconic Wicca. It usually is kind of like identified as like the religious version of like the dragon paths, but that is not the way it is for everybody, so I just want to make that clear. And lastly, we have how to start. So typically by completing an initiation trial of a year and a day study or craft with dragons. And all that means is this is kind of inspired by, you know, like Gardnerian Wicca, year and a day, like of 366 days that you like immerse yourself in learning about Wicca, about witchcraft, about magic, and about all of these things, while you kind of see if like not Draconic Wicca, if a regular like traditional Wicca was for you, right? Like that's where the whole year and a day comes from. However, what we do see here is that as Draconic Wiccan, it's a little bit different in the sense that it's like not about learning about like Gerald Gardner's version of Wicca. No, it's about learning the etymology of the words Wicca and like Witcha and Witcha, like we talked about earlier, as well as the mythology of dragons and the history of their myths, and like how all these different religions like intersect with the commonality, like common denominator between them being dragons. And that is truly like what you're going to be doing over this like 369 period, as I recommend, or 366 day period of studying the dragons and seeing how your like craft works with them. Like that is what it means to kind of like get started with Draconic Wicca. But not everybody does it that way. Not everybody will do a year and a day. Some people just simply initiate themselves. They will try and connect with the dragon guardian first and then get a ritual to initiate themselves, or they'll pick a book to follow. Or speaking of books, my book Draconic Wicca, The Year in a Dragon, is going to come out this year in autumn, and you can sign up to get the first updates on when it's like available to launch for pre-order, and that will also be linked down below too if you're interested in getting my book on Draconic Wicca that goes more in depth on the system that I am sharing with you here for free today in my 30 days of dragon paths. But that is essentially how you can get started with Draconic Wicca. And that completes part 1 of this video, but let's jump into part 2, which is where we talk about like my notes and how my system of Draconic Wicca is different than others outside of me, and how it might look a little bit different to maybe your understanding or to maybe another's understanding. But this is how I understand Draconic Wicca with my dragon guardians. Number 1, when Draconic Wiccans first connect with a dragon guardian, they often call them Monte as a title of respect to them, but not all Draconic Wiccans are going to do this, right? Like this is a totally personalized decision, and I know many people say that their dragon guardians hate that name and like are like, don't you dare call me Monte, which is totally valid. Like the dragons have their own personal perspectives, their opinions, and their like preferences, okay? So it's ultimately about asking your guardians what they want to be called as a term of respect, but it is quite popular to just call the first dragon that you establish a bond with Monte in Draconic Wicca. And that was popularized in my older videos. If you are interested in checking them out, they will be in my Draconic Wicca playlist that are linked in the cards of this video. Next, we have traditionally, I taught Draconic Wicca as a mixture of traditional Wiccan ritual within the Draconic path and dragon magic. So that would be like before like 2020, like that would be the version of Draconic Wicca that I taught and that I personally practiced. I was also initiated into Wicca when I was like 19, I believe. Around that time, I like ended up living at this house of like a Draconic priest, not a Draconic priestess, I'm the Draconic priestess, of a priestess who initiated me into Wicca, but I was like teaching her about dragons and stuff. It was really cool experience, and I have a video live stream where I talk about like the castle at the crossroads. That's the house I'm referencing right now. But I don't do that anymore. I don't practice Draconic Wicca as like traditional like Wiccan religion as associated with Gerald Gardner, mixing that with the Draconic path or like the dragon path or like dragon magic or anything like that. This is how I define it now. So now I define a Draconic Wicca based Now I define Draconic Wicca based off the etymology of the words Wicca and Wicca, or Witcha. From Old English, that means to bend or shapeshift at will. With dragons, it means it defines the Draconic Wiccan as one who shapeshifts with the help of the dragons, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and that just really changes it to be a very objectively interpretable. Like, you can really just look at that and decide what that means for you. Like, shapeshifting could really mean anything for anyone, if you ask me personally. So that's why I still will call it a nature-based religion, because that is we still keep a focus on God and Goddess with just those polarities and balancing those polarities within Wicca and Draconic Wicca. But not everybody does it, and everybody's going to be a little bit different with their Draconic Wicca, which is the only thing I'm trying to emphasize here, right? This is just how I understand it. And next we have most commonly believes in a god and a goddess as ancient dragons from mythology, most typically Tiamat and Apsu. But again, not everybody is going to be that way. Some people will just pick the dragon deities that resonate with them the most. Sometimes they just pick a deity that they resonate with that just is connected to serpents or to dragon themes. For example, some people will work with Hecate because she's connected with the snake within Draconic Wicca. So it really could be looking like anything, all right? When you work with God and Goddess in Draconic Wicca. And that could also look like any deity in general, could work with any deity, but they simply personify themselves as dragons for you. That's also common. And then next we have celebrates the Wheel of the Year with the Sabbat and Espit dragons instead of just as they're regularly celebrated. We covered this a little bit earlier, but this is also what makes my understanding of Draconic Wicca just different than a lot of people. A lot of people consider being a Draconic Wicca a little bit more abstract and not an actual religion or a system, which is totally valid. But this is just kind of how I have personally understood Draconic Wicca and shared here on my channel throughout my lifetime. And it kind of some people don't agree with it. They're like, well, what the hell are Sabbat dragons and Espit dragons? And I'm like, hey man, they work for me, all right? I don't know what you want me to say. Anyway, lastly, we have the path of Draconic Wicca usually has some sort of a religious element to it, as many Draconic Wiccans will engage within worship in some shape or form, usually of the dragons, but not always. And I have been one of these types of Draconic Wiccans where I worshipped the dragons a little bit for a little while. I tried it out, right? We all have our phases of experimenting, and it didn't really resonate with me that way for very long, right? I kind of grew out of it. Once I grew up and I wasn't a teenager anymore, I really didn't worship God and Goddess as dragons anymore, and I started worshiping God as creator, and Goddess is all of creation, personified through Allah as God and Tiamat as creation symbolically. But that is just to illustrate how completely unique everybody's practice of Draconic Wicca is, and how yours might be something we've never heard of before. So that's it for part 2. Now we're gonna get into part 3 of the video, which is the Draconic Wicca basics, okay? So this is how to get started on the path of Draconic Wicca today after this video if you desired. So step 1 is to begin practicing Draconic Wicca. The most important step is to connect to a primary dragon guardian and or connect with the dragon deity. That is going to be kind of the most important part of this practice, because you're going to need to have that kind of guidance even if you're not working with them in a spiritual sense. Just having a type of dragon that you draw yourself, or that you connect with the imagery of, or a dragon deity that, you know, inspires you symbolically, these are good to identify and help you ground your path in where you're gonna kind of bend your spiritual path around, right? It helps us stay grounded a little bit. And step 2 is going to be studying the dragon world mythology throughout history and the history of Wicca, both as New Age religion and its etymology roots within English. This is just recommended so you can understand the history arc of Wicca, and there's a lot of baggage with it, and we're gonna go over that in a second. And also there's a very special history with how it is the root word of modern day word witch that we all love and use today. So Wicca and witch are really like so very close, and people think that it's so very different, and it's very strange and annoying. And next we have step 3, which is getting an altar set up to dedicate to prayer or worship or ritual work with the dragons, including all the magical tools, including a journal to practice that you feel called to have. This can just really help having like a focus space, right? Like, you do not have to have an altar, but many Draconic Wiccans choose to, because it creates a space where they can have dragon statues and candles, and they can sit with their dragons, and they can worship their dragons and hold rituals with their dragons, and it can really just help someone focus on their path. But for some, it actually is really quite distracting, and it can be too expensive, or it could be like, you know, some people have like disabilities, and like having an altar really does nothing for them. So there's so many different like perspectives, right? So it just depends, like if an altar or all of that's gonna like be worth it for you. Like, you might not even like tools, okay? So just some things to think about. And then step 4, many Draconic Wiccans will choose to dedicate or experiment with a Draconic Wiccan year and a day, or simply dedicate 366 days to learning about dragons. Again, we covered this earlier, and I really just recommend anyone who wants to practice Draconic Wicca to just dedicate a year and a day to just learning about dragons and studying their mythology. And trust me, take it from somebody who's been studying dragon mythology her whole life. You're gonna have to understand that I'm still learning new things today, man. I've been studying dragons since the 90s with little books and things, and like, you have to understand I'm still learning about new dragons to this day. So you're gonna want to hit those books, bestie. You're gonna want to study them dragons. All right. And then step 5, we're gonna have, traditionally after a year and a day of study and practice, the practitioner tends to initiate themselves into the Draconic Wiccan path, usually guided by the dragons. So this is kind of the, I guess, graduation ceremony of like a Wiccan year and a day, but like just the Draconic Wiccan version of it, because now you're just going to essentially be initiating yourself into officially calling yourself a Draconic Wiccan. Some people will say they're studying Draconic Wicca or they're a Draconic Wiccan initiate, things like that. It just depends while they're like actually on their year and a day journey. It's really different for everybody, but it's very, like, I would say popular to go through a year and a day with dragons and studying the dragons, and then at the end of that, initiating yourself into Draconic Wicca using a ritual that the dragons gave you. That is like really the most like popular, common way to start Draconic Wicca. And then number 6, we have determining if you desire to celebrate the wheel of the year, or if you will celebrate the turning of the year and what that looks like for you. So before or during like your year and a day, if you choose to take one, or while you're learning about Draconic Wicca, ask yourself, does celebrating the like changing of the seasons do anything for me spiritually? Sometimes it really doesn't. Okay, sometimes people don't really care, but sometimes it really helps people ground and connect to themselves and connect to the natural world. And that's something that I really want to emphasize with Draconic Wicca specifically. It's really about being in tune with the natural world and connecting to dragons that way, and like personifying these like natural forces and natural changes in reality, like through like dragon imagery, right? So if the like, you don't, maybe like celebrating the actual like holidays of like Samhain or Beltane might not be like for you, but maybe you want to celebrate the like winter solstice and summer solstice and equinoxes in a way that like your dragons inform you, not the way that like everybody does around the world. It's really up to you. Like, that's kind of the whole point of like why we follow Draconic Wicca, is because it's supposed to be a path that shapeshifts around our need to work with the dragons too. So lastly, we have step 7, which is working with your dragons to make rituals with them, and worship is usually the most important part of Draconic Wicca, and it's about cultivating that relationship with our dragons so we can learn from them and, you know, gain wisdom from them. And like, most importantly, we usually like pursue learning rituals and spells and magic from them, but it's also celebrating just being alive with them, and celebrating the turning of the seasons and cycles and stuff with them, and even celebrating God and Goddess with them too. So It really depends what works best for you. And next we're going to get into part 4 of this video. This is going to be Draconic Wicca for all faiths and beliefs, or the following are examples of how Draconic Wicca might look like across belief systems. So number 1, if you are an atheist, Draconic Wicca might look a little bit like this for you. For those who do not believe in a divine higher power, Draconic Wicca usually looks like working with God and Goddess as dragons in a symbolic way, or rituals based off their images. And that is like thinking of like the imagery of, like, say, a goddess dragon and a god dragon, and like earth, air, fire, water spirit dragon, and like sun dragon, moon dragon, like on like an altar table, and like using these different personifications within a ritual structure to bring about change within the individual, to shapeshift the individual, to, you know, even worship the dragons involved on the table. Excuse me, I'm talking about atheists, so not worship the dragons yet, but to like work with those like energies of like the dragons on the table as like energies within ourself, right? It's very self-reflective that way. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself with the number 2, which is polytheists. Polytheistic Draconic Wicca might look a little bit like this for you if you choose to practice it. It says, for those who believe in more than one divine creative force, Draconic Wiccans most commonly worship dragon deities from history within the changing of the seasons, and it's not uncommon for people to like worship their own elemental dragon guardians or their own elemental dragon rulers, or like any sort of like deities they find within mythology, or dragons that they find within mythology. And it's often about having these dragons represent, you know, again, like God and Goddess and all of the elements on the table. Sometimes you have dragon deities by name, so like Leviathan or Tiamat on the table sometimes, and worshiping those dragons and, you know, believing in them as divine creative forces. Like this is very common within polytheistic Draconic Wicca. And next we have monotheist. So if you are monotheistic practicing Draconic Wicca, it might look a little bit like this for you. So for those who believe in one divine creative force, then Draconic Wicca might look like the celebration of nature cycles, worshiping God as the creator and Goddess as the creation, or vice versa. This may also look like worshiping God with the dragons. So it's all about knowing that the one singular source, the one singular creative source or God, however you identify with your monotheistic practice or faith, is the source of all dragons and the creator of all dragons and all of earth and all of the heavens and all of the everything, right? And that is just kind of what it might look like if you're monotheistic, right? But then we have the omnists, or if you believe in the truth of all religions, then Draconic Wicca might look like this for you. So for those who believe in the truth of all religions, or them all having truth, then Draconic Wicca might look like honoring or even worshiping all dragon deities at some point, or to simply encounter them to learn and change. So sometimes like omnists will experiment with like worshiping dragons that they encounter, but not all of them do. Some of them just believe that there is like truth to be found within all religions, not that they're necessarily like all real in that sense. It really just depends who you ask, but some believe that they are all real, right? And some believe that all religions are real. The only thing that is required is if you believe in them. Okay, so that is what Draconic Wicca might look like if you're an omnist. And lastly, if you are an animist, then Draconic Wicca might look like this for you. For those who believe in all matter having some form of consciousness or spiritual energy, then Draconic Wicca might look like honoring the dragon spirits found within all of nature and things man-made, with perhaps a type of worship of some kind, though this isn't always the case. So it could be really about engaging with just the dragon energy in all things and the dragon spirits within all things. I still kind of believe everything has like a dragon guardian, like even like, you know, like there's like trash cans over there, right? I know you can't see it, but there's like trash cans over there. Even like the trash can guardian, like I know that sounds silly, but like when you start looking at reality symbolically that way, you're able to extract a lot of wisdom and a lot of understanding that most people miss because it's hidden in front of their face, okay? So there's actually nothing hidden here. You just need the right eyes to see what we are studying when we look into that. But that's it for part 4. And next we have the last part, which is part 5, my Draconic Wicca tips. And this is just like my best tips, tricks, and reminders for Draconic Wicca, how to stay on the path and how to get back on if you feel like you have fallen off the path. So firstly, we have my most important tip as a Draconic Wiccan is to avoid anything from the Gerald's version of the Wiccan religion due to its now known racist, ableist, sexist, and pedophilic roots. So I was initiated into this version of Wicca when I was very young adult, right? But I don't really reference it anymore because of the cultural appropriation that's involved with Gerald Gardner's version of Wicca, and I don't teach rituals from that perspective anymore, like adding dragons. That is what made some of my videos really get popular about Draconic Wicca back in the day, was me adding dragons to traditionally Wiccan rituals, which you can do that if you want to, but I really don't recommend it. I recommend staying away from that and instead looking at the etymology of the words Wicca, okay? So next, my best tip is studying dragon mythology, like I said, and the etymology of the words witcha and witche, which is W-I-C-C-A and W-I-C-C-E, and the etymology of draconic. Then build a craft with your dragons based off your understanding of the etymology of draconic, witcha, and dragon mythology. After your research before defining your own version of Draconic Wicca. And that is probably one of my better tips to give you for Draconic Wicca, is to make sure you have informed consent on how you define your Draconic Wicca by doing your studies and doing your research on things, right? And next we have, just because Draconic Wicca is most commonly known as the religious path of the dragon, doesn't mean that your Draconic Wicca requires worship to be valid. I really want to emphasize this. You don't have to identify as religious, or you don't have to worship any deities or dragons in order to practice Draconic Wicca. It's just most commonly seen as a religious version of Wicca because of how it evolved over time and just the culture of it, right? Everybody really had their own version of it, and we're kind of making their own versions. And then when I was making my videos, we were all just kind of bouncing ideas off of each other, and people were kind of featuring us, right? So that's kind of what led Draconic Wicca to be more of a worship-based religious thing, because it was so influenced off of Gerald Gardner's version of Draconic Wicca, of Wicca, right? With God and Goddess being central to Gerald Gardner's Wicca. But I hope that makes sense in the case that you don't have to be religious to be a Draconic Wiccan, okay? And then next we have focuses on your relationships to the land and the dragons within your company, or those you feel most called to work with from within mythology. And that's something that I think is really paramount in Draconic Wicca, is the celebration again of the seasons changing, the cycles of nature, and being connected to the land and being connected to the elements through that draconic symbolism or imagery, or spiritual connection, right? So it really just depends on how you personally connect the best. And then next we have friendly reminder that you do not need to practice dragon magic within Draconic Wicca, but most Draconic Wiccans will do so with an emphasis on draconic elements, on elemental dragon guardians, on dragon rulers, on keepers of magic, also known as co-magician dragons, that basically help us with just magic in general, and even seasonal Sabbat and Espit dragons. You don't have to do magic with those kinds of dragons. You don't have to do dragon magic at all to be a Draconic Wiccan. In fact, I know many Draconic Wiccans who just don't practice dragon magic. It's more so of a I worship dragon thing, and that's beautiful, right? But I also know Draconic Wiccans who are atheists and only practice dragon magic in with the Sabbats, and they don't worship anything. So it's so unique and beautiful. So take your time at finding out which version works best for you, right? Especially if you don't know what you believe in either. Take your time to decide, what kind of gods do I believe in, if I believe in gods at all, or do I just believe in one god? What is this? What is this working for me, right? you want to give yourself the space and time to like figure that out, right? So we have also a dragon altar, and magical tools aren't needed, but it is quite common to do so within Draconic Wicca just because of that like space to worship type of, you know, convenience, right? It helps a lot of practitioners connect for worship having that altar or having like a shrine, right? And it might work for you and it might not, and it's not required, but it is definitely there for those who need it. And then lastly, we have a focus on shapeshifting with dragons, keeps us on the path. So if you ever feel like you've fallen off the path of Draconic Wicca, just try and shapeshift yourself with dragons and you'll be right back on that path. And that is pretty much all I have for this episode of our Complete Beginner's Guide for Draconic Wicca 101. Again, if you want all of the resources, they're linked down below in the description, but a full breakdown of all the resources available to you for this series will be in the Hatchling Clan Discord server, which is free for you to join, and we would love to have you there, especially if you're a dragon lover. All right, please join us. We love the hatchlings, we love the dragons, and we love the magic. Woo! Okay. But that is all I got for you today. I will see you in the Hatchling Clan. And if you're new here, by the way, assalamu alaikum, merry meet, and welcome back to your daily dose of DragonFaether. My name is Azura DragonFaether, the Draconic Priestess, and I've been working with dragons since the 90s, here to share with you all of the different ways that I have learned about dragon paths and dragon systems from my dragons over my lifetime. And it was because I was super confused about how to navigate the various versions of the dragon path, people defining them differently, and I was just needing the categorization. So this is what I've dedicated my life to learning, and I hope that you enjoy it. But yours doesn't have to be like this. So if your Draconic Wicca is different, let me know in the comments below. But I will see you tomorrow for the next one. Tomorrow, I believe we are covering dragon alchemy. All right, so yesterday we covered a rumor video. Actually, I addressed some rumors, but the last one we did was draconic witchcraft, and all of those links are in the cards so you can enjoy them. But I'm gonna get on out of here and start rambling at you. Goodness gracious me, okay? But until next time, stay geeky everything! Little hatchlings! Get off this, blessed be an Amen. And please follow me so I don't get lost. We'll see you back next time.